after a year, we signed the first contract. We started the import of Ketel One vodka. Yes, I co-founded the name Ketel One Vodka with the owner of the distillery, but I did bring the Ketel One to the United States as the importer or supplier, as they call it, distribution, gets marketing. That all happened with my own company called Luther International.
So you were the one that was responsible for bringing Ketel One to the United States. And the Mark Ramey podcast today, I am very thrilled and fortunate to be sitting here with someone that I hold in high regard. I know this gentleman through Rotary. I'm in the Rotary Club of Dr. Phillips, and this gentleman is Dave Van de Velde. He's in the Rotary Club of Dr. Phillips. And over the course of the last year to maybe even 2 years, I think I've come to know Dave. And I find his life to be incredibly interesting, mostly because I see that Dave has taken everything that he's learned in business and in marketing, and he's applying it to our community. And he's applying it coming from the Rotary perspective of service above self. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to David Van de Velde. And I know him through the Rotary Club of Dr. Phillips. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me, Mark. Pleasure to talk to you and whoever is going to listen in. Welcome from the villages of Florida, where a bunch of us are retired and drive golf carts as if we drive cars, but it is the center of Florida and most of the time good weather. So happy to be here and happy to be with you.
Thank you kindly. And David, I'm noticing that that's not necessarily a Southern accent that you have there. That accent is from somewhere. Could you tell us a little bit about where you're from and about that story, what those beginnings look like?
Well, the beginnings were in 1940, born in 1940 in Holland, in a small town called Zierikzee, which is on an island which is between Rotterdam and Flushing on the North Sea. And it's 1,100 years old, the little town. So that means whatever you touched was usually built way, way back, and modern gas stations we don't have in downtown Zierikzee. But it is a tourist now attraction. People want to come and see an old town. But I grew up there as a young fellow in a very small community. My father was a dentist, and he was the only dentist on the island, so the office of my father was in the house. Result was that everybody in town knew me because I was playing in the backyard, and so when I would go to school and do something bad, which happened too often, everybody said, I know who you are, and I'm going to tell your father. So I didn't get away with anything. But my father was also a Rotarian. So I was brought up with Rotary, and when I joined in 1973 the Rotary in Oakland, California, I kind of knew already what was going on and have been since that time a Rotarian myself.
So what brought you here to the States, Dave?
Well, I was sailing ships for Holland America Line, the cruise line as we know them today. In those days, they were liner services. That means they brought immigrants from Europe to America. And so the Swedish had their ships, the Germans, the Dutch, the French, they all had big liner ships that would cross the Atlantic Ocean. But in the 60s, airplanes are starting to become better and long haul. So people would fly to the United States, the immigration that was going on, rather than go on the 7-day trip on a liner ship. So the result of what these liner ships, what are you going to do with them? And so two families were very smart and said, let's call it cruising. We didn't know what cruising was. And so that's where the cruise business started. So on the Holland America Line, I visited my ship many times, East Coast, Gulf, West Coast. So I started to see the American life. Our passengers were often Americans. And I said, that country is close to my heart because it gives you the freedom to do whatever you want to do. And if you can make a lot of money by selling oranges on a street corner, good for you, make the money. That wasn't possible in Europe. Everything is restricted, everything is fine, everything is licensed, etc. So the freedom to do what you want to do was for me America, and I came over in 1969 after my seagoing career, came to the United States and settled on the West Coast.
So, David, I wrote down something very important, and I myself am in a mastermind, and the name of the mastermind is the Freedom Builders Mastermind. And what you shared is a mouthful. Freedom to do whatever you want to do. I don't know what it means. What it means to you. To me, that means I've got time freedom and location freedom, and having that as a resource, I think, is invaluable, especially when it comes to spending time with family. I know that you've been through quite a bit in your life in business. Can you tell me a little bit about how that freedom played into your ability to take you down the path of business, and tell me a little bit about where you've been in business and perhaps where you ended up now?
Well, when I came in 1969, I arrived in San Francisco airport, and we drove in a car across the Oakland Bay Bridge to the Oakland side of the bay. And there was a cement truck in front of me. And I was trying to read on the big drum that was slowly turning around. And I was trying to read what it said that had a statement on that big drum. So my head was going like this to say, what does it say? And it said something very important. And it said, find a hole and fill it. Now, the truck meant to say with cement. And I said, no, in life, in business, if you find a hole, if you see something that people just cannot solve or do not know how to solve, you can solve it. And if you can make money with that, good for you. But you have to be an entrepreneur. I call it somebody who can think three-dimensional, to say, I can fill that hole and then fill that hole. And that's what I did in the United States, and always tell everybody, particularly the young people, find a hole and fill it. Don't do.
So you're in California, and you see this, find a hole and fill it. And really what it meant to you, I love what you took from that, is I can solve a problem. The hole represents a problem. And if you can solve a problem for someone else, then you're creating value.
Correct.
What did that value look like in California in the late 60s? What did that mean to you?
Well, when we drove over that Bay Bridge and we came close to the port of Oakland, which you can see off the bridge, there was a large parcel of land that I looked at and I said, that can be a container terminal. Now, in my past, still in Europe, I was involved in the construction of the first container ship in the late 60s and sailed that ship even to the United States. So I had a background in containerization, and the West Coast didn't know yet the container traffic in 1969. And so I looked at that piece of land and I said, there's a hole and I can fill that. I know how to build a container terminal. So the next day, first thing I did after we came in Oakland, buying a big American car. I bought a big 8-cylinder car, an Oldsmobile Cutlass, by the way, and because I knew I needed wheels, and the Queen in Holland had a Cadillac, and I wanted the same 8-cylinder car as the Queen was driving in Holland. And so I bought the Oldsmobile. The next day, I drove to the port of Oakland, and I said, I see that parcel of land, and I can develop that. I can make that into a container terminal. And they said, well, we know about containers, and that's why we have this land available for the container terminal, but we really don't have an experienced operator for that terminal. And I said, well, here I am, because I had that experience from the port of Rotterdam, where I also handled the container terminal. And so here I was. It was only sand at that time, only sand. And we said, let's start a container terminal. The third day, I wanted to drive around there to kind of see, get visual on how big is the terminal. And I got stuck with my brand new Oldsmobile in the sand. So the developer had a big D9 Caterpillar, and I call it, he idled me out of the sand. And I learned not to drive my car in the sand anymore. But that's where the first hall that we could build. As a matter of fact, I did the container operations in the Port of Oakland. And we, at one time, we had 6 terminals. And that became a little bit too much for me because I'm more an operations man than a financial man. And with
So you
big
built it
investment.
and then you were running it also. Is that correct, Dave?
Say that again, if you will.
So you had the vision, then you built it,
Right,
and then you were running the terminal.
right.
Wow.
Right. And so, having all these terminals there, we were the only operator called Marine Terminals Corporation. We were the only container operator really in the Bay Area. And so there came a moment when we had 6 terminals running that the port said, we need a competitor in here. You know, competition, we need that. But I knew all these captains of all these ships from way back in Europe. And when they saw me, there was even one line that said, we don't even need a contract. We know him so well, everything is fine. Don't worry about a thing. And the people in the Port of Oakland said, no, we need your signature. And they said, don't worry about it. We shake hands. Anyway, they signed anyway. But I really had a good time there developing that because uh, I had I was a one eye in the land of the blind. In other words, I was the one that everybody wanted to come to, and the
Well,
competition never did any harm.
from that's important what you just said. You had one eye available when everyone else was blind.
Yes,
The one-eyed man in a world of people that are blind comes out on
that's
top.
correct. That's correct.
And clearly you were creating something. So where did that next venture take you to? I mean, I understand that there was something pretty amazing that you did with shipping that hadn't been done yet on the West Coast. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Are you referring to the automobile business that I started?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The uh, when we got into the container business, the competitors were in what we call the break bulk business. Break bulk, I mean pallet loads and so on and so on. And there is
Hmm.
one thing in the break bulk business that became very big is the automobile business. And the automobile import and export was very little, but the import business was new. The Japanese brand started to grow very fast. As a matter of fact, we unloaded the first ship with Honda cars, and later on I will
Hmm.
have a story about Honda. And we didn't have the big terminals, and so we had to develop big terminals. One was a shipyard, a Kaiser shipyard, and we developed that into automobile terminals, and then started to work with the big ships that became like big garages, which you see today, the big box ships. They carry
Hmm.
10,000, 12,000 cars. And as a matter of fact, I handled the DeLorean cars. If you know DeLorean, the grill wing cars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they were made in
Probably didn't have to handle too many of those.
no, I, I think it's something like 7,000 or so that we handled.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so that was
So what happened with Honda? Tell me what happened with Honda, because I know that's an amazing story. Tell me about that.
well. One day I came back on an airplane from Europe because I always visited my European accounts twice a year. We did all the European cars, Porsche, Audi, Volvo, Volkswagen, etc. And you have to stay close. Europeans like that. They want to know you and see you. So I came at the San Francisco airport and my sales manager is waiting for me. And he said, by the way, yeah, I'm going to bring you home, take a shower, get clean clothes. You're on your way to Japan. And I said,
Yep.
no, I'm not. He said, yes, you are. I said, why? I don't need to go to Japan. And he said, I do not know anything why, but you're commanded to go to Japan. So I go home, change my clothes, get another suitcase, and I'm on Northwest, in those days, Northwest Orient Airlines, on my way to Japan. Come in Japan, my vice president in Tokyo office waiting for me, and I said, Nagase, I said, Mr. Nagase, why am I here? And he said, David, I do not know. I said, well, this is ridiculous. Are they going to talk to, who wants to see me? He said, Honda. I said, oh, okay, fine. It's my biggest account. Honda was my biggest account, very close to me. And I said, that's fine, but if they want to talk about rates or stevedoring or drop-ship or whatever, I have a lot in my head, but I need the papers, to negotiate. He said, I have no idea, Dave. So the next morning, we are picked up by a limousine, and they bring us to a big convention center. And it's an automobile show. So the automobile show is, as you know, the cars, European cars, American cars, Japanese cars, lights, girls, mirrors, whatever, things are turning around. And I look at it and say, wow, but I've seen many shows, so it wasn't that special. So there was a long carpet, a red carpet, going towards the end of the room the space we were in. And they took me there on that red carpet. And at the end of the red carpet, elevated, is an old man, skinny, then skinnier, who is standing there. And I said, who is that? And they said, Mr. Honda. I said, Mr. Honda? Mr. Honda? Yeah, Mr. Honda. The one who started Honda? Yeah, him. So I said, wow, am I going to meet him? And they said, yes. So at the beginning of where the little ceremony took place was the president of Honda USA. His name was Jack, the American name was Jack. And I said, hey, Jack, how are you? What am I doing here? He said, Dave, you're going to meet Mr. Honda. You will hear. So they brought me before Mr. Honda. I had a little pot belly because I was a good California boy and we eat well. He was skinnier than hell, and so you bow. You take a step forward, you bow, step forward, you bow. He just went 180 degrees. I couldn't do that. I would take a deep breath and do it good as I could, but, so Mr. Honda then says to me, thank you for coming, and you are the best transport operator in the world, your company. And I said,
Wow.
Honor. Oh, thank you very much. And then he said to me, you will get present. And I said, thank you very much. I thought a gold pen or something like that. He said, when you come back in your office in California, you will get present from Honda, from me. And so I thank you very much, very nice. Then he said, you're very important to us. And I said, yeah, thank you very much. He said, you are now Ichiban in Honda. Ichiban means
What does that
number
mean,
one.
Dave?
Ichiban is number one. That's the guru in a family. You have an Ichiban. And the Ichiban decides if you can get married to this girl or not. Everything goes through Ichiban, and whatever Ichiban says, that's the law. That's the rule.
Mm.
And so now I am Ichiban for Honda. That means when I talk to the president of Honda USA and I say I want this done, it gets done. No questions asked. But I have the fiduciary responsibility to do the best thing for Honda. So Honda must have the lowest rates, the first docking privileges, the best longshoreman, you name it. He gets everything the best because I'm Ichiban. I have to do that because of Ichiban.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if I wanted something, then they would do it. Kind of awkward, and I think that in the long run, Ichiban was a good idea because Honda had priority wherever it was, whatever it was, Honda was always number one. So it was a good business decision. However, I'm back from Japan for about 10 days, and my secretary comes to me and says, Dave, there are a lot of people, Japanese, in the front of the offices, and they want to see you. And I said, why? He said, I don't know. So I go to the front of the office. There's the same Jack, president of Honda USA. And I told him, I said, Jack, you always call me and say, let's go for lunch or for dinner and that type of stuff. I didn't expect you, so I'm not ready for you. He said, don't worry about it. He is the president of Mr. Honda. And the present was a Honda Accord that was 2 years ahead of its time. So it had
Oh, wow.
17 speakers in it, and it was a gorgeous car. So I look around and I sit in it, and it was a wonderful car. And then he said, look at the VIN number. Now the VIN number is PQR123, a long number, right? I said, yeah, I know, it's on the dashboard, it's the VIN number. He said, no, look at the VIN number. I said, you want me to really look at the VIN? Look at the VIN number. The VIN number was my name.
Oh, wow.
That car
So
was made for me.
that's rich. And what I'm observing, and I wrote this down while you were sharing this story, is Ichiban is number one. And what I'm aware of is Ichiban is number one when it comes to making
Right.
decisions. And what I'm hearing and I'm imagining, it's because of the trust that you built.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing, and that's what's coming through. So if we could fast forward a little bit, because I think what you've done for our community is truly what I want to get to. But between then and now, you also you did some pretty amazing things with some liquor companies, correct?
Right.
And you came about and devised and developed some pretty amazing marketing strategies. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because this marketing mind of yours, we're going to come to a point where you're going to tell us how, and I'm just going to give a little treat here or a little foresight as to how you were able to use that marketing mind then to keep students at high schools from bullying. So fast forward a little bit to now to Ketel One. Talk to me about that. What role did you play with the vodka Ketel One, and what did that look like?
Well, I was with a group of friends of mine in Holland, and my brother-in-law was serving us Ketel One Geneva, which is a gin. Geneva is gin in Dutch.
Mhm.
And so frozen, cold goes down very easy. And we all liked it, but it was gin. And so one of my friends said, if you can make this, because I had a little beer company, import beer company as well, on the
Mhm.
sideline. And so I had all the licenses. And so he said, my friend said, if you can make this Ketel One gin into a Ketel One vodka, then he worked for Macy's. He was an executive for Macy's. He said, Macy's will sell the Ketel One vodka. And I said, well, that would be nice, but I do not know if they have a vodka or not. And so the next day I went to the distillery and I said, I want to talk to you. I speak your own language, which makes it a lot easier. And I said, I'm
Mhm.
interested in making, having you make the Ketel One gin into a vodka, and then my company will import it and sell it in the United States. And so that was done. And indeed, after a year, because the Dutch are very careful, they want to really check you out, etc. After a year, we signed the first contract, and we started the import of Ketel One vodka. So yes, I co-founded the name Ketel One Vodka with the owner of the distillery, but I did bring the Ketel One to the United States as the importer or supplier, as they call it. Distribution, gets marketing, that all happened with my own company. It's called Luctor International. Yeah,
So
and
you were
that
the one that was
was the story.
responsible for bringing Ketel One to the United States.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Now, I'm imagining that's quite a commitment because now you're committing to, all right, you've gone ahead and invested in making a vodka. You've invested in allowing me to bring it to the United States. Now, Ketel One, Dave Van de Velde's commitment is let's get it sold. So what does that look like? How did that happen?
Well, you have to go out and get distribution channels. in order to get distribution channels, you have to show the distributors that you are unique, um, that you are going to do something and enter the trade with something that nobody else has. In other words,
Yeah.
you're not making McDonald's hamburgers and you're going to sell McDonald's hamburgers. You're not special. So you have to be totally unique. I designed programs that were totally unique, which started out with making videos. For example, in those days it was VHS videos, make how we produce the Ketel One vodka, that we use an old pot still and coal-fired uh, heating systems, and how it was all basically done by hand, and inform the bartenders on how the product was made. Because if you, and this is one of the tricks, I wanted to be one of the most expensive vodkas on the market. Because if you're cheap, it's a money game. The, the cheaper, the more you sell. And I said, no, it's not the start. Is Ketel One good enough for you? I turned it around and said, are you good enough for Ketel One? And I would go
I
with
love that.
salesmen on the road, and I would say, don't sell my product over here, because there are people that only want to drink the cheapest of the cheapest. We don't belong there. But we have to go to the higher end bars, hotels, restaurants, etc. And together with this video and getting the story out how the vodka was made, we got an interest. All the other bottles on the shelf in the back bar or in the store, people don't have a story about the whiskeys and the gins and whatever. The bottles are standing next to each other, and that's it. My bottle had to have a whole story. And so a bartender, for example, would rather sell Ketel One vodka because A, the price was higher, so the tip becomes higher. He could tell a story to the consumer who says, gee, I didn't know that, and he even gets a bigger tip. So the bartenders, we became a bartender brand. The beginning, when we started, we only had liter bottles. That means we couldn't go into the stores. So that made it a very rough start. If you cannot sell in the stores, but only what we call on-premise, which is restaurant business, it's a three-legged stool. You have to be very careful.
Yeah.
You're going to fall. And so it was very difficult. Ultimately, after some time, the distillery agreed that we needed 375 and 750 milliliter bottles and the miniature bottles. But
Dave,
it took
what
a
I
long
heard and
time.
what I wrote down, what I heard and what I wrote down is that you were always intending to design programs that were totally unique. And what I also took from what you recently said is that you weren't interested in being one of the crowd. You wanted to stand out. And you had to, in order for that to happen, you really had to believe in yourself. And the reason that I bring that up is I'm in the real estate sales industry and I coach agents and our organization coaches agents. And I think all too often, part of the problem with sales is if you don't believe in yourself and in what you're selling to begin with, then you've already failed. And what I'm hearing is you started with the idea and the concept that from the get-go, are you good enough for me to, I'm going to say work with you because that's what it would, apply to in my industry, but are you good enough for Ketel One vodka? So I think that's meaningful. You started with a mindset that brought you to a different place and caused your product to stand out. And I think that's rich and I think that's valuable. So going forward now, because I really, really want to touch on your mind and what it's done for our community. Let's fast forward now some time. And now, what I've observed about you, Dave, is that your mind never stops.
Yeah, I
I
heard that
know that. I
before.
know that. I know that about you. And I think that's why I was so fascinated to have you on the podcast, because I think that you bring a lot of value to those that are around you. And having a mind that never stopped, what I also noticed is that you saw a problem recently with our young people in our community, and you looked at it and you took that same concept in marketing and how can we bring this about, and not necessarily, in other words, are you good at, are we good enough for you to be in our school? It was, are you good enough to be part of our program? And you templated that same concept and idea in a high school to cause students to buy in so that it would change things around. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did with Leesburg High School?
Yeah, we talk about the Leesburg High School because I live in the villages,
Yep.
and the next town up is Leesburg. Uh, we did some charity work with that school, so I knew the principal. And one day the principal said, Dave, I have a problem with bullying in my school, bullying and fights.
Mm.
It's terrible, and there is nothing you can do. And I said, I will take a look at it. And so I decided that we don't take an approach as from being educated in the school business, because the school is a business in a sense. It makes money, it gets money from the
Right.
government, and the more you do, the more money you get, and the better you are, etc. And I said, I'm looking at it from a business point of view. Trying to talk to other schools, I often got the feeling that if you're not a PhD in education, then you do not know anything about schools. This principal was very willing to work with me and look at totally different approach than what the education system said the approach is.
Mm.
And that was market share. And when the school opens up in August, and everybody goes to school for a new school year, bullies have 100% of the market, the bullying market. They can pick on anybody that comes by. And if some guy says, let's bully this little blonde girl over here, then she's gonna cry because there is no support system, there is nothing. So he have 100% marketing. So I said, what we have to do is get the best kids in the school together. And what is that? That starts out with the Interact Club, which Interact Club is the Rotary Young Students Club in the schools, called Interact.
Yep.
And I said, let Interact Club spearhead to deal with all the other clubs in the school. Soccer club, debate club, dance club, you name it. Let's get all these kids to support us and say, we want to stop bullying. Now, the second thing is the invisible group of all the kids that don't bullying is not being noticed. They just go by and nothing. The bullies stand out. They walk around, everybody goes away for the bullies. Why don't we, to get working on that market share, why don't we take a part of the market share? A little part to start out. And that is, all these good kids in all these clubs are going to take a pledge. And the pledge said, I will not bully. And they sign a big banner at the lunchtime in the cafeteria, and they sign this big banner that says, don't bully, stop bullying, various slogans. And so they got a big white button. They put the button on the backpack. So now we start to see white buttons on the backpack. Those white buttons are our anti-bullying marketing share. So all the clubs, it's about 10% of the schools, started to wear the white buttons. The white buttons said, if we see anybody bully, we're going to report it. And the principal said, I will follow up, my people will follow up. Because we have to get rid of the bad people, the bad kids. We don't want to talk to them, we have nothing to do with them, the school can punish them, but we don't talk to them, we only talk to the good kids. So now the good kids start to see that they are getting in a group together, and they start to see that it helps the school. Before, a lot of kids, when they were bullied, had a stomach ache in the morning and told mommy to call the school that they were sick. Well, they were afraid to be bullied. Now they see that there is support, because when these white buttons are around, they feel safe. So the group started to grow. In our second year, this was in 2019, in the second year, at the end of the year, 85% of the kids in the school had a white button. We had taken away the total market share from the bullies. Because if they saw that little blonde girl that they were going to bully, was not going to happen. There were too many white buttons around that would report immediately. Kids know what's going to happen. If there was going to be a fight tomorrow, the white button kid would tell the administration tomorrow morning at 10
Yeah.
o'clock, so and so is going to fight so and so. So the school suddenly started to become a safer place than it was before. The principal of the school, a couple of months ago, spoke before our Rotary Club, and he told us at that time, you were there and I was there, and he told us at that time that the graduation rate is day one that the student goes to school, the high school, and the date that he graduates. The graduation rate was on average 65 to 67%. And we had brought it up in a matter of 2 years to 85%, because
Wow.
the kids were feeling safe, and they wanted to come to school, and they were together on the issue.
Yeah.
And so the principal then told us that 85% graduation rate continued up till now. And it will be even close again this year, because, according to the principal, we changed the culture in the school.
Wow. Wow. So you went from bullies being 100% of the market share to, within a year's time, now you've got 85% of the student population all supporting an anti-bullying campaign, which then not only did it cause less fights, from what I understand, it dropped the number of fights significantly.
Yes.
It also brought kids to be willing to go to school because they weren't fearful to go to school.
They had many friends.
And now the lag measure to that is that you've got a graduation rate at a high school that's gone from 65% to 85%. That's huge, Dave. And what I'm aware of is, two of Rotary's initiatives. One is Peace on Earth, and the other is education and safety for women and children. That's the third initiative of the 7 initiatives. You've touched on 3 of the 7 right there. That's huge, Dave. So I know your mind still doesn't stop. I know that program's still implemented in the school, and there are other schools, including schools even in our current Orange County, that are looking at implementing this. So thank you. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your willingness to put yourself out there. It was your time, talent, and your treasure that backed this program. And how meaningful is that, what you've done for the community? It's super powerful.
And now we're going to make peace.
Yeah, I know. Your brain still hasn't stopped. Tell us about that one now. What's cooking with Peace on Earth? Tell me about that.
Well, it started out with the students in school. A student, when you ask him to do something, he wants a little bit of a reward. My father asked me when I was little to put the garbage outside, and I would say, do I get a dime for that? And then my dad would pay me a dime, and I put the garbage out. So how do we reward these students to do all of this? And that is that I was part owner of an aerospace testing company at one time in Southern California. And
is there anything that you haven't done, Dave?
Oh, I've done many more things.
All right.
And so I had contact with NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, etc. And I decided that I wanted the kids that did sign up and took the pledge not to bully to get their pictures on the moon. So if a student signed the pledge, then we had a picture. It could be a picture of the student and friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, parents, grandparents, the donkey, the dog, whatever. Whatever you want. And they would then go to our little website and send us the picture. And these pictures went on a space rocket and then go to the moon. When we did this program and it was successful, I was thinking about peace. And Rotary, with 35,000 clubs around the world, peace is important. And I said, how do we bring all these clubs together, these 35,000 clubs together, to say at the same date, which is September 21, and this year
What
again,
is that day? September
September,
21st is World Peace Day, right?
that's World Peace Day. So how about as
Yep.
we Rotarians together at one time in the same time period say peace on earth? That are 1.5 million Rotarians that can do that if we would get everybody to play with us. So, but where do I get all these clubs together? We cannot do it on Earth. I cannot bring a club from Vietnam or Tokyo or whatever together with a club from Orlando. It doesn't work like that. So I said, you know
Mhm.
what? We're going to take a rocket. It's going to go to the moon, and all these clubs put a picture on the website, and then all these clubs will go to the moon in a capsule digitally, and then we have a joint point on the moon where all these clubs then can say to Earth, peace on Earth,
Hmm.
at the same time, the same battle cry.
Yeah.
And that's what we are working on right now, and it looks like that it's going to be a big success. It's always a little bit of a struggle to get started because nobody knows anything, and until they do know, then they get enthusiastic. But it is a wonderful program, and so we are going in November with a SpaceX Falcon Heavy to the moon, and
Wow.
the capsule, the rotary capsule, will be built into the spacecraft, and we have a 2 terabit uh, uh, computer disk in there, and they're going to be there forever. So forever, these pictures will be on the moon, uh, and I hope to do it next year again. And it's nobody has done it. We have put Rotary on the moon as the first ones. Uh, it's unique and has many programs to go with it, and we'll get into that later on what we're doing. But just to have Rotary be the leader to say all together at the same time, same slogan, peace on earth.
That's beautiful. That's really rich. And so what I'm seeing, Dave, is we've got I've got a person in front of me right now that has come from another country, made a new beginning, has been in multiple different industries, and you're just not stopping. You're not slowing down. There's significant energy that you have. Um, and most recently with this anti-bullying campaign, as well as with the idea and the concept, let there be peace on earth, um, you're raising the consciousness of the planet. That's pretty powerful. And I'm grateful to know you and observe you. And I'm grateful for you taking some time to share your story with our listeners today. And my hopes are that it inspires others. And I look forward to seeing you at Rotary next Wednesday.